20 questions about the 1950 census that's going to become public in April of 2022 and the one-step locational search tools. I'm also including a handout link. I give talks on the 1950 census, in fact, all the census years, and this handout has a lot of links in it. Now, I have 20 FAQs that I want to talk about. This slide and the next two will show you what those questions are. My idea is that obviously you can pause this video at any time, is that you're not interested in hearing all 20 of them, that if you wanted to look at, let's say, number 4, you at least would know where it was in the order of the FAQs. All the FAQs will start with a title slide. Okay, so the first couple of FAQs are general information about the 1950 census and the fact that name indexes are not going to be done immediately on that. You're going to need locations. The second page that you're looking at talks about what is an ED, because that's what you're going to have to find if you're doing a location search. And we will talk about enumeration district maps here. And there's a number of potential questions there if you run into trouble. And then I fitted this all into one slide, but these are FAQs on the One Step website, which is the main website, I would think, aside from the National Archives, which would have maps to find locations of your targets by addresses, etc., on federal censuses, and quite a number of those censuses, those years we have done. Okay, so question number 1, obviously, what is an FAQ? And the answer is it's a frequently asked question. And, I've made up these questions because I know where the problems are that people run into. The One-Step website, which we will talk about in more detail later, this is the main utility. It's called the Unified Tool. And you can see we have a section on frequently asked questions. We just recently revised that. If you clicked on that, eventually you would find a link to the revised version for 1950. There's a lot more FAQs here, but what you're going to hear and see on this video, some FAQs aren't on the website itself. Lots of them on the website are not on this video, and a number of the ones that we both look at are a little bit different, the approach I've taken to them. FAQ 2. People ask, when will the 1950 census become public? And the answer is after 72 years. So on April 1st, 2022, the National Archive, which presumably will have its own website devoted to this, will open up the schedules, the images of the schedules on April 1st, 2022. Now, a lot of people think that the 72-year rule has something to do with life expectancy. It does not. And I have a YouTube video which looks at the history of that 72-year rule. It's about a 50-minute talk. So it has nothing to do with life expectancy. So another question then is, how long after the 1950 census becomes public will there be a name index? And so far, and I'm giving this video in January of 2021, I haven't seen any chit-chat online about plans to do a name index. Certainly after a census is released, commercial companies will produce name indexes. But in the 1940 census, when it came out in 2012, there was a consortium of groups led by Family Search. They brought together 160,000 volunteers, and they name indexed that census in 5 months, as you can see, and that's available free to the public. So the 1950 census is a lot more people, 20 more million, and a lot more census districts. So it's going to take some time. And since we're talking about name searches, I thought I would bring out this slide, which I use in my talks, that some people think that you're going to see the exact spelling of the name you're looking at. You need to relax your assumptions and try a number of different strategies to find people on name indexes. So if there is no name index, and there won't be in April of 2022, or I can't find the name on that index, then what do you do? And of course, the answer is you're going to do locational searches. You'll need a 1950 location or address. But if you had that, there are 1950 enumeration district maps available right now so that you can look at a map, find your location, and find the ED number. There are ED definitions and urban street name searches that are now available, and that's on the One Step website, and I'll talk about that later. Location searches are really neat, even if there is no name index, or even if there is a name index, because you can find people name indexes missed because of mistranscription. You can show a missed family residence. You can see once you get to the right enumeration district, you think, hey, that residence should be there. You can follow the enumerator as they walk down the block. You can see the numbers, and you can find out if that residence was really missed. And in that way, at least you won't keep looking. If you didn't know that, you might be looking forever for different name variations. And the 1940 census had a lot of people who came to our utilities because they wanted to know who lived in their house, their older house, 72 years earlier. So, FAQ 5. Where can you find your target people's 1950 addresses? And you should be looking right now and accumulating them. And we've put together a list of possible areas that you can look for and figure out who you want to look up on the 1950 census, and then go through your resources, including asking people. I mean, this is the first census that I'm going to be on, and also Steve Morse, which is really neat. And I remember my address that I should be there. So take a look at all of these suggestions, and you might find them and start to list them, get them in some sort of order, so you won't be caught by surprise. So if you have the address, the next thing you need to do is to find out what ED number that residence is in. So we're going to now ask, what is an enumeration district? And a definition from the National Archives and Records Administration, that's called NARA, or NARA, is an enumeration district, abbreviated ED, is defined as a basic geographical area of a size that could be covered by a single census taker within one census period. Now let me do a little bit more about how is an enumeration district defined. It's usually a polygon. In other words, it's on a map as a square or something like that, some geometric figure. It could be an institution. Institutions may have their own enumeration district number. It's a two-part number since 1930, and that's going to be important because there's a trap later that I'll explain that confuses people when they look at maps. ED don't cross political lines, and the Census Bureau figures out the enumeration districts, puts them on base maps, usually from other governmental agencies, and there are certain rules about that. ED numbers may change between census years, so you can't use your 1940 ED number for 1950, even if those people haven't moved. And as I indicated, where the underlining maps are, and those maps may be from 1930s, they may be from early 1940s, so you got to be careful about that. In 1950, there were over 230,000 enumeration districts, and the average was about 656 persons for each one. Now compare that to 1940, where there were quite a less number of enumeration districts, 164,000, and there were a lot more people per ED. This may actually make name indexing longer to do because of the large number of enumeration districts. Okay, so question is, where are these maps? Where are these ED maps? They are online and they are freely available. And the National Archives catalog has the maps. Eventually, I would think that the NARA would have their own separate 1950 website that might also link to these maps. This started in, actually it was in 2014. They didn't announce this until 2016 that they were putting all these maps online. And they put over 8,000 enumeration district maps. You can find them in the catalog. And they indicate that it includes all county maps. There are actually 5 that are missing. And any map that includes 5 or more enumeration districts. And there are a number of maps that you cannot find, especially in smaller urban areas. They indicated it would provide the primary access to the population schedules. So I think there's going to be an emphasis on maps on the National Archive website. Certainly a good utility. Help with ED map interpretation. Now, these maps do not look like a typical, like a gas station map, a service station map. And we have written an article on the use of 1950 ED maps. You should take a look at it. It's on the website. It's also on the handout, the link for that. And it explains some of the problems that you may face. For instance, you expect a map to have north on the top of the map. That may not happen with some of these maps. You may expect to find an enumeration district with a street index. There are no street indexes in the majority of these maps. So take a look at that particular essay. Okay, so you go to the National Archives catalog, you have an urban area, even a rural area, and you can't find your ED map. What now? Well, it could actually be there still. The essay that I showed you previously tells you all the things that might go wrong, and it may be there. Just remember that rural communities and most unincorporated small communities and small towns under 5,000 will only be on county maps at the catalog, and the names of these communities won't be indexed in the online catalog. The only thing you'll see is the title of the map, which is usually just the county name, and obviously the state as well. Keep that in mind. There's also another funny area here. This is a search for 1950 maps in Pennsylvania in Delaware County. You can see that there's a map there in the upper area for Darby. There's a map there for Eddystone. And then there's a funny looking title of a number of different enumeration districts. And it says it's an urbanized area. Well, an urbanized area consists of one or more cities. This is a unique starting definition in 1950. Cities of 50,000 or more and all the nearby closely settled suburban territories or urban fringe. Within this urbanized area map, there's multiple maps, and they include a large number of large urban areas, but you won't get to it with the catalog because they are not in the title. And so what I did, in fact, here is what it looks like, that particular map. It's actually, you can see 12 maps, and really neat. So what I did was I went into the National Archive website. You can become a contributor, and I tagged this particular map, that urbanized area, with all of the township names that were here. I tagged over 160 urban areas and also some mislinked and misplaced maps that I had told the National Archive about, but they had not corrected. So hopefully that will alleviate some problems. However, there are some missing maps. And for the one-step website, our utilities, we had to make our own enumeration district maps for over 20 missing urban areas of over 20,000. So I could not find on the National Archive website maps for these particular large cities. We made our own map and put those online on the one-step website. And I'll show you where that utility is. So if you can't find your map on the National Archives catalog, but we, the one-step people, have a 1950 street index for that urban area, we must have either found the map on the catalog or made an ED map ourselves, one of the two. And we put up a viewing 1950 enumeration district maps in one step. The advantage here, a couple of advantages, is that we have a utility as part of this to find the county of where the city is. In addition to that, all of the links are correct. Our own 4 large city maps are there as well. So this is an alternate to going directly to the National Archive website. You go through the one-step ED Maps website, which also goes into the NARA area, but also makes it a little bit easier. At least we hope it does. So the next question is, everything looks fine. You found the map. You found the enumeration district number. You go to the website, which presumably will ask you to enter a number. You enter the number and it says, no such number, inaccurate number or something like that. And you swear that you got the right number. So what's going on? And this is really important. In 1940, they didn't give you an indication of what went wrong. Maybe they will, by software, alert you to the problem. So let me show you the problems. Here is a map of Bibb County, Alabama. We're going to be looking at a real example of finding a small unincorporated community here. You see there are a number of enumeration districts, and they all are numbers like 415, 416. The bottom has 419, 4 dash. So it's a double number. Very clear, double number. The prefix 4 is for Bibb County. Here is the 1950 map for Long Beach. You notice it's not a double number. So we have around the circle 68, 72, 73. Now you may think that's the enumeration district number. It's incomplete. We're missing the prefix. And people might not know that, and it's going to create problems. So what you want to do when you look at a map like this is you want to look for the legend on the map. Now, there are 4 maps for Long Beach. We're on the third map. It's not filled in. The legend is not filled in. You want to go to the first map to see the legend. And if we go to the first map, we see now that it tells us that all ED numbers are preceded by 65. In other words, that 72 there above the arrow is not, the ED number is not 72, it's 65-72. Okay, that's very important. All right, now, let's assume that you do have the right prefix. So we're at Fort Worth, Texas, which is an extreme example here of what I'm going to tell you next. The enumeration district shows on the map is 284. We know it's not 284, right? The prefix is 261. We enter 261-284 in the program, and it tells us there's no such enumeration district. Now it's possible that they lost it. I don't know. I've seen that one or two times. Very, very rare. But there's something else going on here as well. And that is that these maps are done early in the process. They're given to the area supervisors. And then the supervisor says, a single enumerator cannot cover that. We're going to have to split it up into parts. Now, Fort Worth, Texas had an experimental program in which they had a lot of school teachers go out and do the enumeration, and they needed extra EDs. So they split these EDs into a number of different parts. About something like 3% of all urban EDs are split. And you can see here that 284 has been split into 7 parts. So 261, 284 no longer exists. Instead, we have an enumeration district called 261, 284A, another one 261, 284B, and so on. So if you enter a number like 261, 284, and it says that there's no such enumeration district, add an A to the end of that number. And if it then says, okay, we'll accept that number, you know you have a split ED. Obviously, if it's split, you'll at least have one A side. Most splits are only 2. In other words, the ED is halved. But keep that in mind. That's really important. All right, now we are going to turn to FAQs for the one-step website. The one-step website. What is it and where is it? So this is what it looks like. It has a lot of different utilities, quite a number of utilities here. It's at stevemorse.org, not .com. .com is a professional guitar player. And there are over 300 utilities. It's a free site. You notice that some of them have $ because they lead into commercial sites that you can see some things there, but probably are not going to see images on those commercial sites unless you have a subscription to them. But these are mostly free utilities, at least from our end. If you want to know more about the one-step website census tools and how it originated for the 1930 census when they came out in 2002, I have a 30-minute YouTube talk on that. Steve Morse is on the left, your left. I'm on the right, and Dave Case is in the center. Dave's pictures from 2006, and Steve and I from 2010. And unfortunately, Dave died last year, actually 2 years, 2019, in a rafting accident. So it's a short talk. It gives an indication of how we, within less than 2 weeks, came up with the one-step website part concerning census tools. As part of that census part of the website, there's something called a unified tool. the Unified 1950 Census ED Finder. And I'm going to show you how that works in a second. So if we take a look at the portion of the one-step website that's the U.S. Census, we will see our main ED utility. We actually had a whole bunch of utilities that we blended into this single one. FAQ 14. Show me a typical rural and urban location search. Now I've updated and upgraded this section from the original video that I produced, because I produced a separate demonstrating urban and rural locational searches, as you can see here. But I decided that the example I gave in this section for a urban search on Fort Worth, Texas, I would still retain. Now, I'm going to show you a search of an urban area. And we'll take a look at Fort Worth, Texas. Remember, we had two problems with here, and you won't see those problems on the search on the one-step website. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a house on Drew Street. I looked at a Google map to figure out a random house. It's on a block that has Henderson, Adams, and Fogg. And we're going to find that ED for 1950. So remember that this, I've kind of spliced this into this section now. So to do the urban search for Fort Worth, Texas, you would go to stevemorse.org. You would choose the U.S. Census section, and then you would choose the Unified tool. And then I'm going to show you in real time a search for an address there. Okay, so here is going to be our second search. This is going to be an urban area search, a large city, or at least even some small cities. We have over 2,000 cities with street indexes on this tool. We double check to make sure that the top is 1950. Remember, I showed you how to get to this utility. This is called the Unified Finder. I need to go to Texas because that's what we're looking for. I come down here. Texas is a big place, and it has a lot of counties. Now, I could put a county name here if I knew where Fort Worth was. Lots and lots of counties here. But I don't need to do that because generally large cities, there's only one of the name of only one with that name. So I look here. Remember, this is grayed out. I can't do anything here until I do something. I come here. I ignore the other. Because that only gives me boundary streets or political definitions from enumeration districts. That's not what I want. Drew Street is in the inside of the ED. It's not going to be found on the boundary streets, that name. So I come down here, and I'm looking for Fort Worth there, and I don't even do anything. Just click that. You notice most of the boxes are not going to allow you to enter your own typed information. We don't trust you. You're going to have to choose the choices we present. And now here are all the enumeration districts. You see how many are split here for Fort Worth, Texas. And there's all sorts of things on the bottom, including a list of our volunteers, some other things here as well. So the trick now is going to be to figure out what enumeration district that 1108 Drew Street was that we set up as an example. So we come here and we look for Drew. Now there are lots of streets here. If I press the letter D, I get to the D's immediately, and now I can go through here and look for Drew. There's Drew. And it says here now in red, of course no one reads this, that you can reduce it. And before I do that, you notice that all those EDs now, we only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We only have 6 EDs that have Drew. Now some people stop right here. But it says here in red, and people don't read this, that you can reduce the number of EDs by selecting cross streets and back streets. And I'll show you what those are as a figure there. But those are basically the same streets names on the block that the residence is on. So let's figure out the other ones. We come here, we're making it easy for you, and we enter 111108. Okay? And I want to see on Google Map what the streets are on that block. So it shows me this here. This is 1108. It's West Drew. And we see that there's Drew Street, if you can see there. The block is Henderson, Fogg, Adams. Okay? So here are the 4 streets. We've entered Drew. We want to enter Henderson, Fogg, Adams. Those are the ones we want to enter. So we come back here. Now we know what to enter. We open this up, and you notice now there are a lot less street names. The reason is that these street names come from these enumeration districts. Okay? So let's look at Adams. Adams was one of the streets. There's probably only one Adams, even though it says south here. We'll press Adams and see what happens. So now we have 2 streets. And those 2 streets are in only 2 enumeration districts. Are only in 2 enumeration districts. So we come here, reduced again. You notice that we have Fogg here in Henderson. Let's press Henderson. So Henderson doesn't get us down to 1 specific enumeration district. Well, let's pick Fogg. And now we're down to a single enumeration district. We can look at more details here. We can look at the definition of 261-284B, which links to the film. So that was pretty quick. What you want to do is you want to use this street index aspect of the unified tool for cities that you see on our city list. If you don't see the name of your city on the cities list, you don't do this, what I just showed you. You go to that, come up here, the other, so you open this up. You can't enter anything here anymore, and you hope that the name of your small community was on the ED definitions, or I added it when I went through the county maps and added a whole bunch of names there. Okay? It should work most of the time. When it doesn't work, it's usually not because the utility is bad, but one of the assumptions has been violated. Okay, so let's get out of here. Window Shift. Now I have included this particular FAQ to show you some of the assumptions behind the Unified ED Finder. When things go bad on these searches using our tools, it's usually not the problem of the utility itself. The utility itself is doing fine. It usually is because one of the assumptions is violated when you do the search, and so it's nice for you to find out what those assumptions are. The assumptions are that the resource material, the maps and other things we used, is accurate and representative. That our transcription is accurate and representative. That the street configuration hasn't changed between 1950 and 2022, because you're probably going to be using a modern map to find out the streets on the block. Because remember, we This is a search where we start with an address, and we're not looking at the map, although we could use it even to confirm what the one-step website comes up with. Since we're using a modern mapping program, it should be accurate also even to the side of the street for an address, that all EDs are bounded by street names, that EDs are rectangles, they're non-overlapping, with few boundary streets. That street names or house numbers haven't changed since 1950, that city limits haven't changed, that physical blocks aren't crossed by city or ED lines. And these are all assumptions that are violated in certain situations, and you should be aware of that. Okay, so you have a number. The census came out in 2022, and you had problems. You had problems, first of all, because you thought that maybe things were wrong when you came up with that enumeration district number using the one-step website. You couldn't get down to a single unique enumeration district number. And that doesn't surprise me. Let me show you that here is a situation with this idea that enumeration districts are regularly in an area like kernels in an ear of corn. Here we have 3 blocks. The block on the lower left has its own enumeration district, 2-38. The other 3 are in 2-39. And you can, guess at what the street names are. Make up your own. If I was searching for an address on 2-38, and entered all those 4 street names, I couldn't get down to a single enumeration district. I would always see 238 and 239 on the results, because those 4 streets in 238, those street names, are also included in 239. So this is one possible reason why you can't get down to a single enumeration district. Now, there are other situations as well in which you can't get down to a single enumeration district number on a search. There are some areas of cities with very high density of people in which a single city block has more than one enumeration district. Manhattan has a large number of examples like that. In order to make the algorithm work in those blocks, I've put all the street names in each of the enumeration districts. So in that situation, you can't get down to a single one. There's also situations where a single block, a city block, is split between 2 enumeration districts, and I'll show you that later in FAQ 18, like a ward line, where in order to make things work, that on each part of the block, I have put in the enumeration district all 4 block numbers or names. Okay, so that's in FAQ 18. 17, why can't I find my street name in the Unified Tools City Street Index? Well, we could have made a mistake. We could have mistranscribed the street. And so you can look at some of the other names on the index, and maybe you'll see one that looks like it might actually be that. So why don't you have a street name on the index? Well, the street name may have been changed since 1950, and you're going by the new name, and in 1950 was a different name. And the second one is pretty common, that the address and the street names were actually outside the city limits in 1950. So you assume the person had always been there, always in the city. No, they weren't in the city. They were in the outskirts in 1950. It could have been not on the ED map we transcribed, and some of those maps were pretty old. They weren't 1950 maps. They were 1940, 1930. I even found some of the National Archive maps from the 1920s. You should note that I do have a video on YouTube on street name changes. We have a table of over 260 locations where we have old and new street names that may help you when you run into a problem if your street has been renamed. So here's another FAQ. Why is a street name not in the ED you say it is on the actual schedule? So and a couple of answers to this. So we have a street name on our name index, street name index, and you think, okay, then it must be on the actual schedule, the actual census when it comes out. Well, there are a couple of possible reasons. Streets with commercial-only buildings would not be shown on the 1950 population schedule. Maybe the enumerator went down this street, didn't know that in the back there was some sort of residence there, missed it, etc. That's one possibility. There's another one, but I want to emphasize something to you, that my goal is to be useful, not necessarily accurate, and to avoid negative searches. So it doesn't bother me if I add streets to an enumeration district, even if they don't appear in that enumeration district on the actual census sheets, or if it increases the number of ED possibilities for your results. In other words, you're going to get a lot of false positives, but I would rather give you false positives than false negatives. And I'll show you what I mean. Take a look at this section of a city. Remember that there's some sort of prefix somewhere. Let's look at ED 94. If you notice that the bottom boundary is split along the backyard of that block. So if we look at the center, we have Maple, we have Second, we have Beach, and we have Third. That's block 260, north and south. And it turns out there's a ward line there, and that's what separates them. Now, if I did a transcription of 260 and put down Third Maple, Second ward line, you wouldn't know there in the modern map that there was a ward line there. You would put down Beach as your fourth street. And as soon as you put down Beach with those other three, if I had done it that way, the program would have said no such block. So what I did was I put in a phantom street. In other words, I included Beach in the ED streets of ED 94. And in that way, I completed the streets on the block. So there may be these phantom streets that you will see. And, you know, I did that on purpose, actually. And also, 19 would explain that as well. That why are there modern street names on your unified ED finder? Well, there's a number of reasons for that. If we did our own enumeration district map for a missing area, we might have used a base map much more recent than 1950. So there might be many modern names that are not in that enumeration district. NARA has, quote, 1950 maps from 1940, 30, 20. So we're many years older than that, and we might add to the undeveloped areas of that map names of modern streets. We don't, you know, guessing, especially when we're proofing. We're proofing the maps and our transcriptions against a modern map to understand some street names that aren't quite clear and might add names, modern names, to undeveloped areas. If we saw that a street name on the 1950 map was changed, the name was changed on a modern map, or both an old and new street name were on the ED maps, and some of them do show that, we might add both names to the ED, and you might think one is a modern name. It's actually, you know, the same street. But we were not consistent with this methodology. And finally, the last FAQ I want to show you is, you know, why can't I find the residence in the ED number your ED finder points to? Well, first of all, Not everybody was counted in 1950. There are estimates of the undercount, the people who were missed. And as you can see from this particular table, about 1 out of 25 people were missed on the 1950 census. The value actually of a location search is that you can go to where you think the residents should be, look at the path the enumerator is taken by the residents they are getting information on, and see if it really was missed. And remember that you should always look at the end of each ED as well, because people who were missed the first time through are often put at the end, and in 1950 it will be starting on numbered sheet 71. Even if there are 5 sheets, the 6th sheet with the additional people would be numbered 71. Also, I would ask, are you on the wrong side of the block? So you're looking for an even number, and all the numbers on that street name are odd. You're on the wrong side. You're on the wrong block. Is your residence number outside of the range of numbers in the ED? Well, that's a possibility. And have they renumbered the residents along the street name? So this is an attempt to make it easier when you do the searches on the 1950 census. It's only a year away, a year plus, since this is January of 2021. This has been another of my JDW talks. I have YouTube talks on census resources, Ellis Island, immigration, and finding people on the manifest. I am a retired professional biologist with an interest in birds, and I have a number of natural history topic talks and virtual birding field trips. And so I hope that you have success with finding your people, that you start accumulating address lists now, and I hope I'm going to be on that 1950 census, and if you're old enough, I hope you find yourselves there as well.